Hello, today we're going to talk about the Plantar Cover Pad. This is a really versatile pad and I'd like to show you for your consideration a way of applying it to the foot. This type of pad can be made of different materials for different purposes, but today we're going to be using 5mm semi-compressed felt with the purpose of offloading the first metatarsal head underneath the right foot. This particular shape of the plantar cover, as I've said earlier, can be used in different materials. So if we wanted to cushion there, if there was an atrophy of the fat pad over the metatarsal heads, we could cut a plantar cover shape of Hapla felt, which is a mixture of felt and foam, which mimics the micro and macro chamber arrangement of the fatty padding over the metatarsal heads. Or we could use Hapla swan foam for a cushioning, if we wanted to cushion the impact shock of walking over that metatarsal heads there. That would be fine too. Here is a plantar cover, similar to the felt plantar cover, but made of elastic foam, whose purpose would be to cushion impact shock on the foot, particularly if there's atrophy in the fatty padding over the metatarsal heads. But we're going to use semi-compressed felt for the purpose of offloading pressure. Now, from the classic equation, pressure equals force over area, the ground reaction force, we're going to spread over a large surface area, which should then, in theory, reduce the pressure to that particular spot. So, first of all, let's define the parameters of this pad before we cut it out. It's going to sit approximately 1 centimetre just proximal to the toe webbing space for the distal border. Then for the lateral border, it's going to follow the exact contour of the lateral border of the foot here. On the medial side, it's going to follow the medial curvature of the first metatarsal as it articulates with the first cuneiform and then the navicular. And for the proximal border, we're going to follow an imaginary line between, let's just grab a skeleton here, between the base of the fifth metatarsal, the styloid process, and the tuberosity of the navicular. So approximately this area here, which looks quite large, but remembering that the wider the surface area, the more the area that's taking the force, and so the less the pressure applied to this area. So let's cut out our first portion. You can cut the distal edge of the pad out in a light curve. But what we're going to do today is follow an imaginary line from the second metatarsal to the first, and then from the second metatarsal to the fifth. So, like so. So, across from the first to the second, and then from the second across to the fifth. And that gives us our distal border. Now, the lateral edge will follow the lateral edge of the foot, which it approximately does anyway. So we'll just narrow it slightly. Then the proximal border, remember across this imaginary line from the styloid process to the tuberosity and the navicular, which is probably just about there. And then finally the medial border. Now this is easily achieved by taking a cut from the medial corner here down to the proximal edge of the pad, about 2 centimetres away from its edge. So, if we cut it like so, we have our plantar cover following those angles. The next stage is we're going to bevel the edges of the pad to achieve a nice skin closeness for sticking and also comfort for the patient as well. So, let's just cut off, sorry, just turn it around this way. On the beveling the pad at roughly a 45-degree angle around all its borders. Okay, so there's our beveled plantar cover. As I said, this can be used in other materials too for other purposes. But when we're cutting it out for the first metatarsal head, our next stage is to make a space for that first metatarsal head. And we're going to take a cut from the interweb space here, just between 1 and 2. That will form our cut approximately there. And at the base of the first metatarsal, which would be approximately there. So if we just cut in and curve it round, there we can see we have a reasonable space there for the first metatarsal head to sit in the pad itself. So you can reverse bevel or under bevel the cut if you like. This isn't always necessary, but a study has shown from 2008, Dr. Patton revealed that if we leave this, it can increase the pressure around the cut edge, which may be particularly sensitive on skin where pressure is an issue. So to underbevel, to remove that pressure, just quite simply trim around the edge, like so. And that will take away some of that cut edge pressure. So let's move then to stick it onto the foot, peel off the paper back, and now just place the pad gently on the foot, aligning it so it's accurately placed. Okay, so there is our 5mm felt winged to the first plantar cover. This pad can also be winged to the fifth to offload the fifth metatarsal, or U'd with small U-shaped cutouts to the fourth, third and second metatarsal pads. Obviously, the more you cut out from the front here, the pressure then may not be taken off quite as effectively because obviously the surface area has been reduced, but one can have double winged plantar covers too, which are fine. Now, to enhance this pad's function, we're going to, and keep it in place, we're going to put some retentive strapping on. The first piece of retentive strapping, we're going to use Hapla band, which is a longitudinal stretch elasticated tape. And that elasticated tape really helps because we can curve our tape around some of these concavities and convexities, primarily convexities here, without creasing, which is really useful. So, taking as much tape as you need for the distal retentive strap, here, let's trim that off. Curve both the ends so that hosiery doesn't lift the corners. Okay. Now with the distal part of the retentive strap, what I like to do is I like to take it all off the paper backing. Okay, as you can see, this tape has a light longitudinal stretch in here, which is very useful. And then I stick it just over the second metatarsal head, obviously both on the skin and on the pad. Now you can see why we left that 1 centimetre gap here, because we're leaving space for the retentive strapping to stick to both skin and pad. So with this stretch, now very carefully, put your thumb over here and then just gently guide this round. Similarly to the lateral side, just gently guide it round, following the edge of the pad. And here we have then a retentive strap where there is no creasing. So there's no creasing both for the patient to stand on and for aesthetic purposes as well. Now to complete the retentive strapping, we're going to use wider 5 centimetre Hapla band, and we're going to use 1, 2, 3 pieces overlapping slightly each time. Can be up to 50%, but ultimately what we're about is just keeping this pad on for the duration. How long should this pad stay on? Well, opinions differ, but ultimately as long as it stays on for, primarily through baths and showers, but obviously it can be kept dry too if you wish the pad to stay on longer. But it is stuck on, so maybe up to a week at a time. But as I said, opinions vary, so it's up to you and what you want to achieve from this pad, how long it stays on for. So let's stick the first piece of strapping on, the longitudinal stretch here. Can be applied if you want more compression to this pad, you can stretch and stick it on, or if you want to allow the the foot's fatty padding to expand, just lay it on gently. So just lay it on very gently, smoothing it down. Like so. The second, a slight overlap over the first. Just lay it on gently, stick it round. And final piece, both on pad and skin. Okay, there's a little gap there, so we can always cut a fourth piece out. And then finally lay that down. And there we have a 5mm felt plantar cover winged to the first metatarsal head with retentive strapping.